my fellow committee members, Jane Waiter and Ramin Faraji. We have the quorum, and I call the first meeting of the committee to order. Welcome, everyone. Today's meeting is being held with the TDSB staff, their legal counsel, applicants, and candidates participating electronically via Zoom. This meeting is also being live streamed. The live webcast can be watched on TDSB website, tdsb.on.ca/stream/board meetings, one word, /live meeting.html. I ask everyone for their patience with any delays and technical issues. I would like to ask everyone to please keep your microphones on mute unless you are speaking. As part of each agenda item, I will ask members to raise their hand or unmute their microphone if they wish to ask questions or speak. When voting, members, please raise your hand in front of your camera to indicate your vote or unmute your microphone and speak. Let me begin with the land acknowledgement. Although we are in different locations and meeting virtually today, the Compliance Audit Committee acknowledges the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Next item is the election of the chair. I have a motion to confirm that I, Lawrence D'Souza, will serve as chair of this committee. I need a seconder. One of the committee members.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jane. All those in favor?
Aye, Ramin.
Aye.
All those in, everyone is in favor, no one is opposed, and the motion carries. Next, approval of the agenda. Committee members, are there any changes to be made to the agenda?
None from me, thank you.
Ramin?
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I will move a motion to now approve the agenda. I need a seconder.
I'll second.
Seconded by Jane. Are all in favor? Ramin?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah. All in favor, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is declaration of conflict of interest, if any. Members, are there any declarations of interest under Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your microphone to let me know. Having heard none, let us move forward to the next item. That's the rules of procedure. The committee has decided to adopt the rules of procedure of the City of Toronto suitably modified. A copy has already been circulated to all the members. I will move a motion to adopt these rules of procedure. I need a seconder.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah. Thank you. Motion carries. We have 3 compliance audit applications on the agenda today. They are application number 1, compliance audit application by Kevin Wiener for the election campaign finances of James Lee. Application number 2, compliance audit application by Kevin Wiener for the election campaign finances of Nathan Sean. Application number 3, compliance audit application by Kevin Wiener for the election campaign finances of Guled Arale. Before we consider these applications, I will outline the procedure and format for considering them. An applicant, a candidate, or their agent who is registered with the committee administrator may speak to these items. Applicant and candidate will be given sufficient time to address the application. However, I would ask the speakers to present their material and information as succinctly as possible, confine their comments to the application item being considered, and focus on facts and key points that they would like the committee to consider. For each application, we will hear from speakers in the following order. First, the applicant or their agent, followed by the candidate or their agent. After each speaker, committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions. Members may ask questions of the TDSB officials to obtain information relating to the matter under discussion. If the committee decides that it needs to meet in closed session to deliberate in private, I will move a motion to close the public session, at which point members of the public and media, if present, will be moved into Zoom lobby or waiting room and readmitted once the committee resumes public session. We may do this multiple times during this meeting as we consider each application separately. For each item, after we complete our closed deliberation, we will resume in public and the committee will make its decision at that time. Are there any preliminary motions from the committee members?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Ramin?
Nothing from me either.
Yeah. Having heard none, let us proceed with the first application. The first application is the compliance audit application by Kevin Weiner for the election campaign finances of James Lee. Before we proceed with this application, we have a preliminary matter to consider. A communication has been received from the applicant Kevin Weiner that he would not be able to attend all three hearings today due to work emergency, and that the committee can rely on his written application and make decisions it considers appropriate. The committee accepts Mr. Weiner's offer and will proceed with his written applications. Thank you, Mr. Weiner. Is the candidate James Lee or their agent present?
Mr. Chair, James Lee is here in person.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, please go ahead with your submission.
Yes, thank you, Chair and the committee and staff members for spending your time on this. And first of all, I'd like to start by profusely apologizing for taking your time on this matter. I have received a notice for compliance audit by Mr. Weiner, and I actually have to thank him for being as diligent that he was in identifying these issues. And because I have reviewed the items as outlined in his applications carefully, and I have determined that throughout the closing and closing stages of the financials of my campaign, we have made a couple of errors in the submission, and they are in line with the issues that are identified by the application itself. So the first error that we made was in not recognizing $11,900 in campaign materials used for my previous campaign as a personal contribution to this campaign. So per the Election Act, I needed to include any materials that I used from the previous campaign in the current campaign if I do that, because it counts towards my total expenditure limit. So I reused my election website and also some election signs that I paid for in the previous campaign, in this campaign. Now, truthfully, we thought there was something that was off when we were putting in the financials. Just because we had an unbalanced item and we thought, hey, we shouldn't be running this deficit, but there was no contribution because really no cash was contributed. It was just inventory. We couldn't find a specific line because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a specific line on the income or revenue section of our submission to put this $11,900, and we couldn't find it. But what we had missed was there was a bracket in table 2, where we put in the materials carried forward expenditures from the previous campaign, where it says whatever amount you include here, you have to manually add it to, or I have to manually add it to my personal contributions account. So that was a bracket that we missed. And what we had mistakenly thought was that the system itself would do some magical calculations and balance the books for us, and that'll be that. So that's what our understanding was. But you understand it now. I personally understand it a lot better now, that I needed to take that amount and add it to my personal contributions, so my books actually balance, as opposed to just hoping that it would. So that was really the first mistake I made. I realized that I had to, I should have understood the process better, and it is absolutely my responsibility to do so. So I apologize for that one. The second one, where Mr. Wiener identified to say, even if, we added the 11,900 and change to my personal contribution, my campaign was still in deficit by around $240-ish. Yes, that's correct, because the second mistake and error that I had made was, I guess, it was just lots going on, and it absolutely slipped my mind. I paid for my campaign audits through my personal account. Which I did the audit a number of months after the campaign, so I guess everything was just, I just didn't catch it. What I should have done was contributed an extra $1,000 into my campaign, at least from my personal account, accounted for that revenue and paid for it through my campaign account. But instead, what I did was I just basically took my personal checking account and e-transferred $1,000 to my auditor, and called it a day. And at the time, it didn't occur to me that I needed to include that as a campaign contribution at all. So that was absolutely missed. And once again, that's on the fault of myself, and I apologize for that. So to the committee members, I really have nothing else to offer but my full cooperations towards whatever you decide the next step to be. I also, once again, like to thank Mr. Wiener for his diligence in identifying these issues, because they're true and they're real. And also, I apologize to the committee for spending really your valuable time in having to deal with this. And also, I apologize to the board and the public, because I recognize that it is important to follow the Elections Act and make sure everything's right, especially in things as important as election financials. So that's all the statement I have to make, Mr. Chair, and I will give up my 9 seconds of time left.
Lawrence, you are on mute. Good.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Do committee members have any questions?
I don't, thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you, Rami Faraji here. Got a question for Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, what was the result of your audit? I don't have actually in front of me. I don't know if a copy of your audit report was submitted. Just curious to know what came out of your audit findings.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Faraji. The auditor didn't find these items as, I guess, non-compliant. We had, very in-depth conversations on expenditures. He went through every bit of my, the campaign expenses with great amounts of detail to make sure I didn't exceed the limit, to make sure every bit of expenditures were covered, and that I had proof of payment and invoices for all of it. We really didn't spend too much time talking about revenue. That's the truth. I have to ask him what happened. And to be frank, that what gave me a sense of comfort that I didn't really make too big of a mistake was because I did come out of that audit without any findings. So yeah, that's a good question.
Mr. Lee, I have a follow-up question. I'm just curious to know what type of support or I guess infrastructure did your campaign have in filing these reports? Was it solely your own work? And I understand that folks, candidates have some time to be hands-on, or was it that you actually had someone look after this? And you don't need to name an individual or the firm or the type of support. I'm just curious to know whether was it solely you who were doing this, and or you had some professional support.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's mainly me. I didn't hire an accountant. We just, it was a self-funded campaign. I had very little donations. I wanted to be as lean as possible. And I had some volunteers accumulating and calculating the expenditures for me and making sure the invoices are there. I was the one who basically put everything into the form. And obviously now I realize I probably should have hired someone to do it properly.
Thank you for those answers and making yourself available, Mr. Lee. Mr. Chair, back to you.
Thank you, Ramin. Yes. So you filled that form 4 online, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it is. I voted online, yes.
Does it look different, the online form from the printed form?
Mr. Chair, it looks very different. You don't actually get to see all of everything in the same page. It's different windows. In fact, the income or the revenue section is in a completely different portal from the outflow section. So it's very different.
And which version your auditor looked at? The printed one or?
The auditor only looked at the printed version.
Yeah, that's a bit clear, right? Anyway, thank you.
Yes, no, Mr. Chair, now that I have reviewed the form, like the bracket under table 2 was very clear when I read it on the printed version. On the online version, I'm sure it's there. I can't access it anymore because the platform has been closed, but I'm sure it was there. I never thought to look there. It was just, but that's why it's my mistake.
Thank you. Any other questions? Jane, you might have.
No, nothing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for your submission in writing earlier and being present again here. Thank you. The committee at this time will be moving into a closed session for private deliberation, and I'm moving the following motion. That the committee recess. Say it again, Ramin?
Yeah, second, if you need it.
Yeah, okay. That the committee recess its public session to deliberate in private, item number 1, and receive the advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege. Fellow members, if you could vote, please raise your hand. Or thank you, Jane. And Ramin?
I support it, yes.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Our motion carries. I ask the committee administrator to temporarily close the meeting to members of the public and to provide access to only the members of the committee and appropriate staff for the closed session of the meeting. In addition, the YouTube live streaming will be suspended until the closed session is over. Members, I would remind you to arrange your surroundings so that no other persons observes any part of the closed session deliberations. Thank you.
Yes, we'll move the candidates into the waiting room and wait until Manchu signals that the meeting is now in private.
All candidates, I see Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We have completed our closed session deliberations, and I will now turn it over to member Jane Waiter to move the decision motion.
So after considering the submissions of the applicant and the candidate, the Compliance Audit Committee rejects the application for a compliance audit of the election campaign finances of James Lee. The reasons for decision will be published on the board's website. I would like to formally bring a motion to confirm that the Compliance Audit Committee rejects this application and ask for a seconder.
Lawrence?
Like a second.
Yes. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah. The motion carries. Thank you, Jane. That concludes the matter of application number 1.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair, and everyone on the committee. And once again, my heartfelt appreciations to Mr. Wiener.
Okay. The next item is item number 8, application number 2, compliance audit application by Kevin Wiener for the election campaign finances of Nathan Sean, elected candidate from Ward 17, Scarborough Center. As indicated earlier, applicant Mr. Wiener is not present in person. However, the committee would rely on his written submission. Is the candidate Nathan Sean present?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Have I pronounced your name correctly?
Yeah, you did it right, Nathan Shan.
Nathan Sean. Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee. Appreciate your involvement in this work, and thanks to Mr. Wiener for being diligent and looking through all of our finances and raising these concerns, as that's an important work of the public as well as all of us to make sure that election finances are intact. And thanks to all the staff who are supporting this meeting and the process as well. So I think in my submission, as you can see, there is a high deficit because, I had ran a 2-month campaign because I ran provincially during the summer. And then after that, my campaign was September to, most of my work was in September to October. And my goal was to fundraise for any deficit afterwards. The core of the issue here is that I have all of the expenses remain the same. All of the income remains the same. I have put into the account through my funds $7,500 into the account to pay for some of the expenses. So that's where the confusion was, because I didn't give $7,500 as my contribution. I was paying it through the account, but I was hoping to fundraise after through the extension. So if you look at the deficit, it's $24,000, but $7,500 of it was paid already, but paid through the account, deposit the money into the account. But when I talked to the auditor, I said, I'm going to hopefully raise the $24,000 so I can get that funds back. So what happened is that we had not put that as my contribution in the list, as opposed to that being money that will be fundraised. So I think that is the technical difference. And I think, looking at the submission application, I understand that it should have been identified as my contribution. It is all on the bank account. It is deposited into the bank, which would have reduced the deficit to around 16,000, as opposed to $24,000. Now, the rest of the $16,000, I have, those are money that I like. So in post December, those are funds that I like. Majority of the fund is for about 8,000 of it for printing costs, 2,000 audit costs. So those are all expenses that were still needed to be taken care of. So the deficit of 16,500 is there. The other 7,500 is the amount that I had put in. So my understanding was that if I had flag that as a contribution, then I wouldn't be able to raise that money back to give me that money back. So we didn't end up listing it as my contribution. We listed it as still money that needs to be fundraised, because the fundraising money total, if I were to not have my contribution included, would have been 24,000. I don't know if that's clear. So technically, if you look at the document, other than that, the majority of the deficit is still. That's why I asked for an extension. As I mentioned, it was a short campaign. I had a provincial campaign right before that, so I was not able to fundraise all the money, and the reason for extension was to fundraise that money and pay the vendors. And I will be filing my supplementary submission next month, in which it will reflect all of the money that I have contributed as part of my contribution, because that would be the end of the campaign, where I would have known how much of own money has to be spent in filling up that gap that exists around the deficit. So I think, other than that, I don't know if there's any other issues identified, but the major concern around large deficits and who is it that is payable to, 7,500 of it was paid through my own funds, deposited into the account and paid out of the account, and then the other funds are still at the end of December needed to be taken care of. Other expenses. Outside that, all of the expenses, all of the income, everything listed there is accurate, and the auditor has provided a report on that as well. So thank you for your time. I don't know if I have answered the questions, but I'll leave it at that and maybe answer questions as well. Thank you. And I want to say, if that was an error, it is an error on our part. If it was supposed to be mentioned as a submission, I wanted to apologize for that and make sure that we will get that corrected in the supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Sean. Members, do you have any questions?
Mr. Chair, if I may direct some questions through you. So I'm looking at the financial statement, and I don't actually see that 7,500 on the financial statement. So is that the 7,500 that you said that you contributed to your own campaign? Where do I find that, or was that an error in the financial statements?
Yeah, that's exactly the error, because I didn't consider that to be a contribution. In my mind, it was something that I was going to fundraise afterwards as the $24,000 deficit. So if it was to be mentioned in there, it would have been mentioned as a contribution from the candidate, and which was not technically what my understanding was, because I was hoping to fundraise that funds to be paid back. But I understand the process would have been to put the 7,500 as a contribution, and then if I had a surplus, then I would have to be. I can ask that to be returned to me, but that's the part that got missed. And I had given all of those information to the auditor, and the auditor knew exactly when the 7,500 went in at different points as well, but it didn't get included as part of the contribution.
So the 7,500 was paid into the campaign account.
Yeah, it was paid into the account, and from that, I was paying some of the expenses that needed to be paid.
Okay, so the balance after the 7,500, has that been paid by you or someone else? Have those expenses been paid for, or
No,
are they
like I said,
amounts owing?
Yeah, so at the end of December, there were accounts owing predominantly 8,000 of it for 8,500 was for printing expenses to a single vendor, 2,000 was for the thing, and there were some smaller amounts that were reimbursements, but most of the bigger amounts were all pending payments, like that still needed to be paid. So, for example, my printing cost was about 20. I think there's 18,000, 16,000, and 11,000. So it's about almost $28,000 roughly. I had about 8,000 to be paid for the same vendor that was left, 8,500. So there were chunks that I needed to fundraise afterwards to pay.
Mr. Chair, those are my questions.
Thank you. Ramin? Ramin, do you have any questions?
No, no questions for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Sean, I have one question. How did you got that number of 7,500 which you wanted to pay? I mean, which you paid out of your pocket?
So as the campaign went on, if there were times I needed to pay something and I didn't have money in the bank, I put in $2,000 of my money and then we paid it off. So that 7,500 was at the end of December. There was 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, and 1,500. At different times when I didn't have money, I had to deposit those. So it was not something I paid at the end of December. It was paid throughout the campaign. Whenever I was short on money, I put it into the bank and paid those expenses.
And you decided that has to be recovered through your extension of your period?
No, there was already 16,000 that needed to be fundraised anyways. And then, so this was there. So I think my hope was to fundraise afterwards to raise so that, if there were fundraise that I don't need to pay out of my pocket for that 7,500. But, in the expenses, like now that I understand the thing, my apologies that I do understand that could have been surplus. And then if there was a surplus on fundraising, then I could have been reimbursed. Yeah.
So the allegation is partly true. In the applicant's submission, the second last paragraph he talks about. He illegally paid for those expenses from his personal funds without first depositing the funds. You did deposit, but it was a self-contribution. And now he seeks to raise additional funds so that he can pay himself those contributions. Okay.
Yeah. So if I had put in so when I talked to the auditor, I said there's about $24,000 that were expenses that was not paid through campaign fundraising and needed to be fundraised. And the 7,500 was my contribution. Like how we define contribution, I thought if I define it as contribution, then that is that I've already made to the contribution. That's not being fundraised as opposed to being fundraised. And I think that is a error, and my apologies for that, because I think that I thought about that as being a way to make sure that we were able to fundraise the amount that needed. And the auditor also looked at the numbers, and that's what because it was still payable.
Thank you for that explanation. Now, who advised you now? How you should have really acted, in the sense, if there is a surplus, you could have taken it back.
Yeah, and I think again, trustee campaigns, we don't have the support of additional bookkeeping and so on. So it was just me submitting all of what I had to the auditor, and the auditor working through the filing. But the auditor made the forms for me, and
he filled the forms.
I gave all of the. I didn't do online form. It was actually through a paper copy that I submitted. And so, but I had sent all the invoices, all the expenses, and given all the things. Everything is in the bank account, and so what it might have looked different is where it says candidate's contribution. It would have said 7,500, and as opposed to and because it was supplementary filing, it was part of the fundraising strategy to have that much money fundraised if I had. But next month when I submit the supplementary, it will reflect all of the things, or if there's a way to correct this view, I would definitely be happy to. I understand that there was a error in the decision around how we looked at that 7,500.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Sean? Thank you, Mr. Sean. Having heard none, the committee at this time will be moving into a closed session, and I will need committee members. Can you please vote for moving into a closed session?
I second it. I vote for it. Yeah.
Jane?
Yeah, I'm in favor.
Yeah, motion carries. I ask the committee administrator to temporarily
Live is back.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Thank you everyone for your patience. We have completed our closed session deliberations. And now I will turn it over to member Ms. Prater to move the decision motion. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. After considering the submissions of the applicant and the candidate, the Compliance Audit Committee has decided to reject the application for a compliance audit of the election campaign finances of Neith and Sean. The reasons for decision will be published on the board's website. So I'm going to move a motion. I move to confirm that the Compliance Audit Committee rejects the application for this compliance audit. May I have a seconder?
Yeah, Lawrence.
And all in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
The motion is carried. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I will definitely make sure to pay more attention to this again. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
That concludes the matter of the application number 2. That's item number 8. Next, we will be moving to item number 9. That's the application for a compliance audit of the election campaign finances of Guled Raleigh.
Hi.
Mr. Raleigh, so you are present. As you know, the applicant is not present in person, and we are relying on his written submission, which was made earlier. If you are ready, candidate, Mr. Raleigh, have I got your pronunciation right?
Guled Raleigh.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Raleigh, please go ahead with your submission.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank committee for taking time out of your day to do this important work of when it comes to overseeing campaign finances. This is kind of one of the most important gears that keep our democracy running. I also like to thank Kevin Wiener for doing the diligent work to ensure that candidates are complying when it comes to doing their campaign finances correctly. This is my first time running for municipal office, and I ran a pretty small campaign. And I think I made some of the mistakes that other candidates have made here as well. I did not correctly put the amount I contributed to myself for the campaign, self-funded the campaign onto the form when I submitted it. The deficit was money that I personally put into the campaign account to ensure that all the expenses of the campaign account were properly paid for from the campaign account. I was thinking I could hopefully fundraise that amount afterwards, but fundraising for TDSB elections was something I learned for doing this the first time, something very difficult to do, especially with the lack of a rebate. So while I was putting together the form, I didn't really, I didn't put the contributions I personally made for my personal funds into the campaign account onto that form. So it was a mistake and an oversight that I profusely apologize for. And I will ensure that if I could correct it, I could correct it, and in the future will never happen again. And I want to thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. Do members have any questions for the candidate?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I don't either.
I have a question, Mr. Rao. You had a website as well, I believe. Where does it appear in your financial statements? You have round sums here. Brochures 865 and signs just a round sum of $7,000.
Oh, thank you so much for that. The persons who printed my sign also did my website, so it was on one invoice. So it was one amount that I was charged.
Okay, thank you. So did you have a bank account?
Yes, I did.
Campaign account?
A campaign account, yep.
Yeah. Did you root route all these payments through that account, or?
Yes, I did. Everything that was paid for the campaign account was paid for from the campaign account.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ral. If there are no further questions, we will move to a closed session now. The committee at this time will be moving into a closed session, and I'm moving the following motion that the committee resists its public session to deliberate in private and receive advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege. Fellow committee members, if you could vote.
I second.
Yeah.
Aye.
Yeah. Thank you. The motion carries. I ask the committee admin.
in public.
Is the candidate present?
Yes, I am.
Thank you everyone for your patience. We have completed our closed session deliberations, and I will now turn it over to member Ms. Waiter to move the decision motion.
Thank you. After considering the submissions of the applicant and the candidate, the Compliance Audit Committee has decided to reject the application for a compliance audit of the election campaign finances of Guled Aral. The reasons for decision will be published on the website. So in terms of the motion, I move to confirm that the Compliance Audit Committee rejects this application for a compliance audit and ask for a seconder, please.
Lawrence?
All in favor?
Ramin?
Aye.
Yeah. So the motion carries now.
Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. That concludes the matter of the application number 3 for the election campaign finances of Guled Aral. Before we conclude the meeting, are there any other business matters? Having heard none, I think it's time for adjournment. That concludes our business for today. I would like to thank everyone for their participation and the TDSB staff and their legal counsels for their assistance. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.